Kia ora students, okay, here we are at the end of our paragraph. We are learning how to write a link. Okay, remember, we are arguing that the setting of Dulce Decorum Est is important because it communicates the horrors of war to the public. And that first paragraph that we're doing is all about the setting being important because it paints a picture for the reader. You'll notice I actually have a picture here in this slide. This is an example of trench warfare. This is actually what World War I looked like. So cast your mind back to that verse where the men are walking away from the front line towards their rest stations. That was happening at night time. This photo obviously taken during the day. They didn't have flashes yet at that point. But you can imagine for yourselves if this was dark and the flares were lighting up the sky, what it might look like as they trudged on through the trenches. Those trenches, that looks dry, but it was actually incredibly muddy. All those trees are bare because, well, several reasons. Bombs, firewood, and also it was like a tactic for getting rid of cover so that your opposition couldn't hide behind it. So that's why I've got that photo for you so that it helps you understand why I've written this link. Okay, so here's my link. Owen's poetry provides a clear description of the environment of World War I, providing a clear commentary to accompany the many photos we have of this time. While we have these photos now, at the time the civilians back home were unaware of the terrible conditions soldiers had to withstand. When we look at photos from World War I, we can see that Owen was giving a voice to an important issue on behalf of all soldiers. So what you have to understand is that these photos wouldn't have just been in the newspaper willy-nilly every day. These photos were rare. We can see them now whenever we like because we have the internet, but there was no such access back in 1918. So Wilfred Owen was trying to expose what was happening through the power of language. This was his way of communicating this to as many people as he could. And it was a really shocking image to those at home who weren't in the war, especially older people, like the older men who didn't have to go to war, and wives, daughters, mothers, sisters. They were really shocked by the imagery in Wilfred Owen's poetry. So I'm here linking to these photos, these examples of photos that most adults would be aware of. You may have never seen photos like this, but most adults would be aware of their existence and know what they look like. So when I use this link, they would be able to imagine that for themselves. So here we have our complete paragraph. Now that we've done everything, our point, example, explanation, and link, and I'm going to read that to you now, or you can pause and read it to yourself. It's really important that you do this because you need to see the whole picture together. You need to see the way that it flows. And remember, this is a first draft for me. I haven't really checked it. There are mistakes. And so if you do notice my mistakes, that's actually a really good thing because it means that you're paying close attention. Tell me what the mistakes are and I might give you a chocolate. Okay. In the opening lines of the poem, Owen introduces readers to the horrible sights of the front line in World War I. Owen writes that the men are walking through the mud of the front line till on the haunting flares we turned our backs. This description of the soldiers silhouetted against a grim backdrop by the flares opens the reader's eyes to the grimness of the setting. Owen's poetry provides a clear description of the environment of World War I, providing clear commentary to accompany the many photos we have of this time. While we have these photos now, at the time the civilians back home were unaware of the terrible conditions soldiers had to withstand. When we look at photos from World War I, we can see that Owen was giving a voice to an important issue on behalf of all soldiers. Okay, so that's our entire paragraph. Your next step, obviously, is to write your conclusion. That will be one whole tutorial because it's only 3 brief sentences and it's really repeating and summarizing what you've already written. So remember, if any of that was unclear, I was going too fast, anything like that, pause it, rewind it, fast forward through the bits that you already know about, write down some notes and questions, and really pay attention so that this is a really good use of your time.